around recruitment into physical activity in the first place. So things like using more inclusive language. So even just the phrase physical activity can potentially be overwhelming for somebody with a severe mental illness. So just calling it activity, and a really small change.
Oh yeah, it just sounds a bit easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can just potentially make a difference. They also recommend placing less emphasis on the mental health aspect of it. So instead of saying that activity is really good for mental health, well, can we phrase it in a way where it's just good for our, it's enjoyable, or can we highlight the social element of it?
It's counterintuitive in a way, isn't it? Not mentioning the mental health, but could work. What about if people do decide to go to, I don't know, an exercise class or some gym or something? What can be done there to make it all feel a bit easier?
Well, it's really important to create a really welcoming environment. So we have to make sure that there is peer support available, for example, maybe a buddy system. But it also needs to be an environment where people are free to make mistakes and not be good at exercise straight away. It's really important to make sure that we take a graded approach. So rather than starting off with like a 10-mile hike in the countryside, we maybe just walk around the block and start.
I guess we're so used to sport being associated with competition and being the best from what we see, or seeing people striving to be the best, that it's hard to separate exercise from competition.
Absolutely. If we can create an environment that takes away that competitive nature and takes away that pressure to be good at something, then people are more likely to stick.
Well, thanks for that. So for those who can exercise and who find it does work for them, the big question is still why. And the runners I met in Eastbourne had some fears.
I can be really anxious one day, or a lot of the time actually, and then I can go out for a run knowing that I'm going to come back and feel loads better.
I just completely zone out. So I'm not a mum, I'm not working, I'm just me running.
And even just like community, so other runners tend to smile at each other, and so yeah, just really it sort of like helps from that perspective.
For me, with my anxiety, my breathing is often really irregular, and running helps physically put me into a regular breath, which then I don't know what that does physically, but it calms me.
It's weird when I'm running. Obviously, it's like the dopamine and everything, but I kind of work through things in my head as well when I'm running. And then I come home and my mind feels clearer. It's a bit of mindfulness, really, isn't it? Like when you're running, you're just focused on the run and chit chat.
What else do you think it does for your brains or your bodies?
There's probably one you'll feel a lot better off.
So Pete, the famous runner's high, have you had one of those? Do you get them?
No, absolutely not. I've never experienced that high when I've destroyed euphoria, so I have had that.
So you do feel happy afterwards, just at the time it's just what, pain?
Well, it's just
Yeah, but scientists do debate exactly what a runner's high is. Does it just mean feeling better than before you went for a run, like you said, or is it more extreme? Is it that sort of feeling that you can go on running forever? And things have moved on from the days when all of this was just thought to be about endorphins. Dr. Hilary Marusak from Wayne State University School of Medicine in Detroit in the US studies what goes on in the brain when we exercise. So I asked her what's happening.
Endorphins are definitely part of the picture, but some of the research over the past decade is really exciting and shows that it's actually the cannabinoid system that's responsible for the runner's high, which is kind of the euphoric and the mood-elevating effects of exercise.
So there's a big German study that actually found that if you block the opioid receptors, you block the receptors where you would get an impact, people don't get this benefit anymore. And I guess that showed them it was something else that was going on.
Yeah, so if you block the endogenous opioid, or the endorphin system as we call it, you still actually get that runner's high effect. So that's kind of one piece of the puzzle suggesting it's something else. And conversely, if you do studies in animal models where you can block the cannabinoid receptor, you actually do block that runner's high effect, which is again more evidence that it's actually the cannabinoid system that's involved in this runner's high effect.
So tell me what the cannabinoid system is.
So it was discovered in the 1950s. It wasn't really until the 50s that the active ingredient in cannabis, which we think of as THC, that part that causes people to feel high, was actually isolated for the first time. And then after that, the whole entire system in the body, called our endocannabinoid system, was discovered, which is what cannabis and THC binds to. And also after that, we found that we produce our own natural versions of things like THC and CBD. And those are our endocannabinoids, and they're really important for stress and mood regulation in general. And it looks like exercise works on the system to elevate mood, anxiety, and possibly reduce things like pain as well.
So with cannabis then, you're not suggesting that instead of exercising, you just smoke a joint?
That would be kind of a shortcut. It looks like it's not really the case. Exercise has a variety of positive benefits on the brain and on the body, and I wish there was like a pill that people could take to get the diversity of health effects.
Now this runner's high is something that people like to debate. How do you know people definitely experience a runner's high? I mean, I run a lot, and I reckon a couple of times a year I get what I call properly a runner's high, where I kind of think, why don't we just stop? Why don't we carry on going through? How do you know people actually definitely experiencing it, not just sort of saying, oh, well, I enjoy running?
It's really a subjective experience. Like, we're relying, like you say, on what people are experiencing. And I work in a psychiatry department. We have to diagnose and treat psychiatric illnesses based on self-report. But there are some objective markers we are looking at for the runner's high, like the endocannabinoid system, which you can measure in blood and possibly also saliva and hair.
So would you take some blood before someone exercises, then you do and then take blood afterwards, and you can see what the difference is?
Exactly, yeah, that's how most of the studies have actually been done. We take a blood sample, we have them run on a treadmill or walk at an incline for 30 minutes, so it doesn't have to be for ages. And what a lot of folks are seeing is that moderate intensity exercise seems to elevate circulating levels of endocannabinoids, so things like anandamide, which is our so-called bliss molecule. So it doesn't take super long, and even 30 minutes is able to do the trick.
Do you see any difference in the levels of endocannabinoids in people who do have mental health difficulties and people who don't?
Absolutely, yeah, because they come online in response to stress, and that could be stress at work, it could be exercise, it could be stress with your partner, you name it. So a lot of people that work in the psychiatric disorder space are thinking that this stress regulation mechanism is disrupted in people that do have stress-related disorders like depression, PTSD, anxiety. So we just wrapped up a review of the literature where we looked at all the studies so far measuring endocannabinoids in people with those disorders versus without. And we were kind of shocked by the findings. We found that folks with those disorders have higher resting levels of those endocannabinoids, and then when you stress them out in the lab, they're not able to ramp up that endocannabinoid response like you would expect. So their ability to manage stress properly, we think, is reduced, and that's really promising because we can have a lot of different ways to target the cannabinoid system for novel treatments for those disorders.
So Pete, that is one thing that might be going on in the brain, but I wonder what else might be happening. Can exercise serve as just distract us sometimes from things we're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a distraction from those things. Just it's almost like a mindfulness. So like in the background.
And the runners I met in Eastbourne did mention all sorts of other things too, like getting out of the house and the social side. What sort of difference can being with other people make?
Well, I think if you look at the popularity of lots of different types of exercise, like CrossFit, for example, it's all about that social connection. It's all about exercising together. So that's potentially a mechanism that enjoy exercise.
So there seem to be all these different things. Is there anything else that could be going on?
There's all sorts of things. Learning a new skill, just seeing yourself getting better, which is running. Improves confidence, improves self-esteem. Might start to notice physical changes in your own bodies, which again gives that sense of confidence. Sleep, reduce stress. There's also some cognitive effects as well from exercise, so improve memory and focus. You know, to switch tasks, for instance, so noticing those things. It's just sort of general feeling.
Oh yes, and everything else might fit a bit better because you just sort of feel you can concentrate, feel that things make sense. It does seem hard to pin down exactly what is going on, what the magic ingredients are for some people find it so powerful. But soon we might know because Jonathan Royser, who we heard from before, is embarking on a trial with people with depression as part of a huge piece of work the Wellcome Trust is doing. And when they have all the results in 5 years' time, we could find them and have the answer. So in your trial, one group's going to what? They're going to come and exercise at the gym 3 times a week?
Yeah, that's right. We've got instructors in the gym and they're doing it in distance for groups from about 4 to 6 people.
And how long for?
They do that about 45 minutes 3 times a week, which just, yeah, it's quite a lot. Just about gets you up to the kind of nice recommended level. And then the other is on stretching and relaxation.
And what sort of things are you going to measure?
So we're very interested in inflammation. There is people with depression who look like their immune system is like activated, not to the same extent as what you expect if you get a cold or something, a real spike in these immunological markers. But the kind of low-grade inflammation, which just makes you feel a bit rotten, really, the same kind of feeling when you're getting over a cold. That's really interesting because the immune system is very coupled with the body's metabolic and energetic system. So the immune system basically takes up a lot of your energy. So these kind of feelings of fatigue or lethargy, you know, not wanting to really do anything. Those are all very common symptoms of depression as well. Scientists often call those sickness behaviours. So we're very interested in those. But then we also know that the immune system has this direct link to a very important brain system, the dopamine system. And that is very important in constructing psychologists for the reward process, which is experiencing and looking forward to nice things. And we think it's particularly important to the motivational components of reward. So when you're really expecting something nice to happen, you're anticipating it, you kind of get more excited and you sort of feel a bit of motivation as well. And so broadly speaking, that's the basis from a psychological perspective of what our hypothesis is. We think that exercise can really have an effect on the motivational symptoms of depression, like loss of interest, that goes along with fatigue, and also cognitive difficulties to kind of brain fog, something you can describe. And then over time, the kind of positive effects ripple out to the other symptoms, because the symptoms probably exist in networks where they interact with each other.
It's the idea then that people do the exercise and this helps them feel more motivated in other areas as well. So does that then make them feel more motivated to, I don't know, cook themselves a nice meal or to arrange something else that would be better organised?
Yeah, exactly. And the really interesting thing about that kind of explanation is got a lot of commonalities with types of psychological therapy. So one possibility for the future is maybe these two things can potentially go hand in hand.
So why would doing some exercise make you feel more motivated to do other things?
Well, we think it's actually a sort of direct biochemical effect, if you like, maybe through this inflammation change, so this reduction in inflammation. We know the immune system interacts directly with the dopamine neurons in the brain, and then the dopamine modulates the activity of brain circuits that are very important in motivation. We're particularly interested in the concept of effort. So we know that depressed people often describe things as kind of like a high effort barrier, and it just feels like too much to actually cook a meal, maybe it's just to get out of bed, let alone go to work or lunch or family. So the idea is that over time, we experience the environment in a different way, and we think that it's reducing the subjective appearance of how much effort people feel like they're going to have to put into something. So things just feel a little bit easier, and then over time that can kind of lead to a virtuous cycle.
Jonathan Rosa. Pete, I think this whole idea about motivation is interesting, that could be what's going on there. So, but it also sounds as if we don't quite know yet why movement can improve our mood. If it works, does it matter why? Do we need to know why it works?
Well, it's important for us to understand some of those mechanisms so that we can help you understand how much they should be exercising, so we can make sure the right people are exercising in the right ways. But I think the bottom line is if you find something that you enjoy and you're capable of doing, then that's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, and then it can be all sorts of different things. I suppose it is the question of finding the one that's for you.
Yeah, definitely. It's absolutely find something that you find enjoyable, something that you feel you sustain all the time. That's really important.
And what about if you're not feeling so energetic? So I think I've done enough running for one program because we ran much further than I kind of realised away from the centre of Eastbourne, and I then ran all the way back to the station for the train and found it's quite a long way, and then I was having to sprint quite a long way to the train. So I think I've done enough of that. What about something completely different than just watching sport?
Well, funnily enough, there's an interesting study which just come out of Japan which suggests that just watching sport might give you some of the same benefits as actually taking part in physical activity. So it's like self-reflection.
So what might it do for you?
Well, the research suggested that just watching sport, particular sports that are popular in that culture, this was a study in Japan. So participants who watch baseball reported enhanced well-being. There's also evidence that the areas of the brain that are related to reward are lit up when you're watching sport as well. So like I say, you might not even have to watch itself gets some of the same benefits.
That is even better. So our take-homes today then are to try to find some exercise you like, to make it easy to do somehow, or maybe to watch some sport on TV.
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Peter Olushaga, for coming to visit us on All in the Mind today, and thanks to the studio manager, Tim Heffer. Next week, something a bit more leisurely. I'll be wandering around a garden, but a garden with a difference, where people place objects that they associate with someone they loved who's died. And why are some older people experiencing anxiety?
All in the Mind is presented by Claudia Hammond and produced by Ben.
You know those times when you just can't tear yourself away from something great on Radio 4?
Great times people come up to me if I'm home from them. Here we go. They'll say something nice, whatever they feel on that, just can I just say it?
With most smart speakers, you can now ask BBC Sounds to pause, rewind and restart live radio.
Can I just say, your dad to the big family and your sister, and my mum always talks about how much she fancied your dad.
So you never have to miss another minute. To get started, just say, ask BBC Sounds.
BBC News at 10. Compensation for victims of the infected blood scandal will be set up by the government today. Around £10 billion is reported to be earmarked. An inquiry found yesterday that the NHS and successive governments tried to cover up the scandal, which saw tens of thousands of people contracted hepatitis C and HIV because of contaminated blood products. The government says the inquiry's recommendations will be addressed without delay. The evidence was one of the victims found 5 weeks ago. His wife, Heather, isn't convinced that politicians are dedicated to providing justice.
I still don't trust that anything will happen. Yes, there could be this call for compensation today, and they'd even announce how it's going to be done. But, you know, there's a general election around the corner. I'm worried that everything's too much politically driven, rather than being authentic and making the right choice and the right decision for justice.
Jersey's parliament is to debate whether to legalise assisted dying. The Crown dependency can set its own laws on the issue. Proposal will give the right to those who are terminally ill and also people facing unbearable suffering from a physical condition. President Biden has condemned a request by the International Criminal Court for arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister accused of war crimes in Gaza. The ICC has also issued 3 warrants for Hamas leaders for crimes against humanity committed during the 7th of October attacks on Israel. Southwest Water says that it's paying out £3.5 million in compensation to customers in Devon who were affected by a parasite outbreak. Around 14,000 properties in Brixham and the surrounding area were told to boil their water. A woman in her 50s has died after being attacked by her 2 XL bully dogs in East London. Police were called to her home yesterday afternoon. And a Japanese town has responded to concerns about tourists littering and causing disruption as they take photographs of Mount Fuji by covering the view with a large black mesh. Locals were concerned about the sudden influx of visitors. BBC News.
This is BBC. Meryl Streep, the greatest actress of our time, or overrated. Organisers of the Cannes Film Festival are certainly the former Cannes, as the star receives an honorary bond, or Ellen Jones in Markham, or discuss her remarkable career, some of her work, the great and Kate Winslet, about her decades of love for Meryl Streep's work. That's all but screenshot after the news at 11. But now, it's time for Woman's Hour with Nuala McGuffey.
Hello, you're very welcome to Women's Hour. Well, in a moment, British cyclist Lizzie Banks gives her first broadcast interview to Women's Hour on how she fought and won a flawed doping case. Also today, did you catch cold case investigators solving Britain's sex crimes? It was on last night. It is a fascinating programme that pulls back the curtain on what forensic science and DNA can now do. They can accurately pinpoint a perpetrator decades after the crime. So we're going to hear from one woman and the detective who worked with her to get her justice. Also, one of my guests this hour describes her instrument as having magical overtones, hypnotic charm, and off-key
poignancy. The avant-garde musician Margaret Lane Tan will perform for us, and yes, the toy piano is coming to the Women's Hour studio this morning. If you want to get in touch with the programme, the number to text is 84844. On social media, we're at BBC Women's Hour. Or you can email us to our website, and for WhatsApp, that number is 03700 100 444. Let me turn to the 28th of July last year. That was when the British cyclist Lizzie Banks received an email from the UK Anti-Doping Agency, and it was to say that she had returned 2 adverse analytical findings, also known as testing positive for substances. The letter stated she faced the prospect of a 2-year ban unless she could establish the source. But feeling certain she had not taken any banned substances, she began a 10-month journey investigating, researching and writing submissions to try and prove a contamination event had occurred. Her final submission was some 144 pages and 40,000 words. She says it was a process which destroyed her mentally, emotionally and professionally. She has talked about feeling suicidal during her battle with anti-doping authorities. She has been absolved of any blame, having proved on the balance of probabilities that her test was contaminated. And in her first broadcast interview, Lizzie Banks joins me now. Welcome to Women's Hour, Lizzie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's turn to that letter that you received that said there were 2 adverse analytical findings, so testing positive. Do you remember how you felt when you received it?
Absolutely. I was actually 50 kilometres away from home on a 4-hour bike ride. At the halfway point of my ride, I stopped to grab a coat, checked my phone, had an email from anti-doping, which in itself my eyes. I've been so careful throughout my career to avoid any risks of contamination, and I just had no idea how this could possibly have occurred. And I know, of course, people listening will be sceptical and they will say, well, that's just another doper speaking, but I urge you to listen to my story and read my story over on www.lizziebanks.co.uk, because it's so complicated and the anti-doping authorities need to change.
But let us get to the specifics of this. What did they say you had taken?
So they said that the term is used. Used means that you've used it inadvertently or on purpose.
Okay.
Now, I tested positive for 2 substances. One was formoterol, which is a medication I take for asthma. I've taken it for 5 years now, and I've had many anti-doping tests, and I thought, how could this possibly be right? Another one was called chlortalidone. I googled this substance, and I very quickly learned that it was a diuretic. I take a number of medications because I've had a number of complicated health conditions over the past years, pericarditis, long COVID, a concussion, and then I suffer from asthma and a couple of other health conditions. And I knew that this wasn't in any of my medications, so I was just so confused. But very quickly, I learned that unfortunately pharmaceuticals can be contaminated with banned substances and are often contaminated with banned substances. And this began a, like you say, 10-month process of research in order to find out that actually this is something that the anti-doping authorities have known about